The first thing you need to do is actually figure out what are you afraid of? Because so often we just get paralyzed by fear and the emotion takes over, and you really need to slow down and just think about like what are you actually focusing on here? The biggest reason most people don't achieve their goals is they focus too much on what they want, but they don't figure out who they need to become in order to make it happen.
Byron Morrison is the author of Maybe You Should Give Up. 7 ways to get out of your own way and take control of your life. Over the last decade, Byron has helped CEOs, entrepreneurs, and business leaders in 15 countries to get out of their own way so that they can break through to the next level of success. Byron is a multiple-time author, mostly to business professionals who are looking to perform at their peak, who are looking to optimize their life in a sense, who are looking to have greater business and career success. And if you're listening and you're looking to have greater career success for yourself, this conversation is going to be for you. When you take away even just one piece of information or strategy or philosophy, or maybe we made you smile, maybe we made you laugh, all that we ask is that you share this show with just one other person who could use it as well. You are the reason the Be Better broadcast has grown the way that it has over the past 2 years with almost 300 episodes, because you are the best part of the Be Better team. Without further ado, let's talk to Mr. Byron Morrison, all the way from across the sea over in the United Kingdom. Byron, it's great to have you here, my friend.
Hey, thanks for having me on. I'm excited to be here.
It's a pleasure. I'm excited to talk with you. You've got your upcoming book, again, titled Maybe You Should Give Up, which is a very controversial title, which I love the title. It's definitely going to grab people's attention. And the subtitle is 7 Ways to Get Out of Your Own Way and Take Control of Your Life. But you've written several books before this. You've written The Effective CEO. You've written CEO in Control. So let me ask you, this is a different title than your last ones. And I'm curious, what was the inspiration for your newest upcoming book?
Yeah, so for me, my other business books, while I'm incredibly proud of them, they were very much focused on the work I've been doing with my private clients. But one thing I've been wanting to do is, since I really started over a decade ago, like my goal is I always want to be an author, like speaking around the world, like having a message that impacted people on a global scale. And this book was very much the thing that I wanted to use as a stepping stone for that. I wanted to pass on what I was struggling with over a decade ago when I was going through my own journey of transformation. Because in this time, as you say, I've had the fortunate experience of dealing with people in 15 countries, really figuring out why we think and behave the way that we do. So this book was really about just passing on all of that to help people actually get out of their own way so that they can get to that next level.
That's great. I know it's going to be very helpful for a lot of people. You said that you wrote this for people who were going through the same journey and struggles that you were. You said 15 years ago you went through these struggles?
Yeah, like if I take you back to like that point in my life, like to be honest, I was not in a great place. I was overweight. I was struggling with confidence. I was in a job that I was burnt out, exhausted, and I knew that I was capable of so much more, but I just felt stuck. And after my dad's cancer, he had most of his bowels surgically removed, and he spent 25 days in ICU, mostly on life support and breathing through a tracheostomy. And luckily, he pulled through, something that I'm eternally grateful for. But that was the wake up call for me that I had to change. And I wish I could sit here and say that overnight everything magically got better. But for the next couple of years, I seemed to always take 1 step forward and 2 steps back. I'd sabotage everything from my health to my relationships, my professional success. And it was only when I started diving into mindset and psychology to understand why this was going on that I realized that the biggest problem was myself. It was that sabotaging voice that caused me to overthink, to doubt myself, to avoid the things I knew I needed to do. It was only when I could actually get out of my own head that I was able to actually get to that next level. And I've seen so many people, whether it's been entrepreneurs, people in the corporate world, or even CEOs running billion-dollar companies, that biggest stumbling block for them is themselves. It's that voice in their head. So that's why I just wanted to pass on everything I've learned to help people break through that.
What kind of business were you in during that time that you were during this chapter of your life? What was the industry? What was the business? What were you up to?
So my background was corporate marketing. I kind of did a master's in business, went kind of the marketing route, and Yeah, it was one of those things that, to be honest, I didn't really know what else I wanted to do. So marketing was like the lesser of a few evils, and I just kind of dived in there.
It sounds like at many points during that journey, was it the growth of the journey that you were on that was giving you these thoughts of maybe I should give up? Like, what were you thinking of giving up on? What was the alternative to not giving up? Like, what were the thoughts that were going through your head during this time?
Yeah, so just to kind of reframe this slightly, like with the book, the reason why it's called Maybe You Should Give Up is it is meant to be counterintuitive. It is meant to go against all of this advice of keep pushing and never quit. But the book actually is not about giving up on your goals and dreams. It's about giving up on everything that's stopping you from achieving them. Because I found that there's 7 mental barriers that all of us struggle with that stop us from reaching our potential, whether that's fear, comparing yourself to others, worrying about problems that haven't happened yet. All of these are the things that cause us to get in our own way. So going back to me as an example, like the biggest thing that was holding me back was fear. I always worried, what if I try and I fail? What if I'm not good enough? What if I get rejected? I would always talk myself out of going after what I wanted. And that's the reason why I was playing small. So yeah, that's why, like going back to what you said at the beginning, it's a very controversial title, but actually it's all about empowerment. It's about
Yeah.
giving readers that belief within themselves that they can overcome this and move forward.
It's a great reframe because when you read it, you can give up on your goals or you can give up on the things that are preventing you from reaching your goals. Like for me, during the chapter of my life, I feel like you and I have very similar stories, very different paths, but I was in sales, you were in marketing. I was in my early 20s. And like you, I was overweight, I lacked confidence, I was anxious, and I began to make small steps towards a much brighter future. The small steps for me started with my health, and then it went to my finances, and then it went with my career. So it was small steps, slowly but surely. And I feel that I also had that fear that you talk about. But because I had people who came into my life at that point who helped me through this journey, a lot of that fear subsided because I had guidance and I had help from other people. Did you have other people in your life who were like, all right, Byron, like I can tell that you're afraid to take it to that next step? Or was it mostly books and your reading material that helped to create that turning point in your life and career?
It was a little bit of a mix. Like I was always fortunate my parents massively believed in me and pushed me, but the thing that actually got me on this path was just wanting to turn my health around. Like it's really interesting looking back because as I said, I was overweight, struggling with confidence. Like after my dad's cancer, I realized I needed to start getting in shape. So I, growing up, never did sports. I was convinced that the gym was for people who weren't like me and that I didn't want to be like. But
Hmm.
I started pushing myself to overcome that fear. And I remember the first time I went into the gym, I walked into the weight section and there was all these big guys like grunting and staring at their biceps. And I was like just so intimidated. I remember just making an excuse like it's too busy now, I'll come back later. And luckily I overcame that fear and I pushed myself to do it again. And as I started building a little bit of momentum, started getting more into it, I realized if I'm going to do this, I need to do it properly. So I started learning about nutrition and fitness and changing behaviors. Like all of this sparked a passion in an area that I never even thought would be part of my life. That helped me start getting in shape. My interest expanded, and then I wanted to start passing on what I learned. So for me, it was just similar to what you said. It was just focusing on the health first, taking that small steps, and then I started figuring out what I wanted to do over time.
Wow. It's very fascinating that health was also the first step that you took. It was the first step that I took. I think health is a really, really good one to start with. And I know people who are listening are like, aren't we talking about business? Aren't we talking about careers? Yes, we are. And health directly ties into your career success, directly ties into it. I know a lot of people at the highest levels of the organization that I work in who are unhealthy. And because they are unhealthy, they are overwhelmed. They face burnout. They are unclear of their next steps. They're, in a way, drifting inside of this corporate structure. And when I focused on my health, and by the way, I love how you said, I'd show up at the gym and I'd walk in and it was packed and I'd leave. Right. I was even the step before that. I would pull into the parking lot at the gym in those early days and I would say, oh man, there's a lot of cars here. I don't want to go in. And I would go home and I wouldn't work out. And it's crazy because I would actually pull in another day where there was a ton of cars in the parking lot. And I'd be like, oh, it's one of those days, but I'm going to go in anyway. And I went in and there was no one in there. And all the cars were for the place next door. So it just goes to show how fear can mislead us, right? We create this picture in our mind of something that isn't even the reality. And fear, I believe, is a very ethereal topic, right? Like when you say that fear is one of the seven things that in order to get out of our own way, we need to focus on overcoming that. It's like, okay, well, how do you overcome fear? Right? You kind of named one thing, and I named one thing. I had a person in my life who helped to be that hero for me. You learned about health and fitness, and by education, it gave you more confidence in order to pursue it. But like, how does one overcome fear and push through fear?
Yep. So there's two steps that I found are massively impactful on this. The first thing you need to do is actually figure out what are you afraid of? Because so often we just get paralyzed by fear and the emotion takes over. And you really need to slow down and just think about, like, what are you actually focusing on here? Is this a fear that you're going to get rejected? You're not going to be good enough? You're going to fail? You need to figure out and bring into awareness what's actually going on. Because until you have that clarity, it's just going to be something that's in your head that you're going to be avoiding. And then the second thing from there, I found is we have to tip the scale in the other direction, because right now that fear is so heavy that it's keeping you stuck because you're focusing on all the things that could go wrong. You need to then pivot it to focus on what are you going to miss out on if you never put yourself out there? Like, what happens if you reach the end of your life and you look back on how you wasted your time not going after what you wanted? What happened if you reach the end of the month and you haven't hit your revenue goals so you can't provide for your family? What happens if you continue avoiding these things and you never reach your potential? When you start making the fear on what you're actually going to miss out on more painful than the fear of what could go wrong, then suddenly it becomes easier to follow through. It's like if you don't want to pick up the phone to call that potential client because you're worried you'll be rejected. Well, what happens when you don't hit your sales targets or whatever it is? You just have to start reframing it. So all of a sudden, it's like, if I don't take action on this, that's going to be the consequence. And then a lot of the time, once you face it, you'd be like, oh, it's actually not that bad, because you build it up in your head to such a huge endeavor. But once you actually follow through, you see it's not actually a big a deal. So whatever it is, you just have to push yourself to get started. Like, I love that reframe because suddenly it becomes more painful not to do it. But ultimately, the big thing is just putting yourself out there and then just seeing that was just a story in your head. It was nowhere near as bad as you were convincing yourself.
Yes, that reframe is huge. Even the reframe of using fitness as another example, the reframe when you pull into the parking lot and there's a bunch of people in the gym, it's like, okay, what will happen if I don't go in? And it's not even that I'll get fat or I won't be strong. It's more so for me the knowingness and the guilt and the shame that I chose not to walk into that gym, that I chose to go home. It's more so the feeling as I'm with myself on the couch or in bed, getting ready to go to sleep, of I made the decision that won't further me towards the goals that I want for
Yeah.
myself. And I think a big part of this is the idea of having that future intention, right? Having that expectation for yourself. Does a goal come at the beginning of this process, or does a goal happen in between? Does it happen after? Like, where does future planning come into this process?
Yeah. So I'd love to just pivot this slightly, but you'll see why in a moment. Because it's
Yeah.
just like, I found in my experience the biggest reason most people don't achieve their goals is they focus too much on what they want, but they don't figure out who they need to become in order to make it happen. And the reason why this is so important is every new level of success requires a new level of you, which is why your current habits, your behaviors, your way of doing things that got you to where you are isn't going to get you to the next level. And if anything, they're the exact reason why you're stuck. And that's why anyone listening to this right now, you need to have that goal and vision in mind, but then you need to stop and ask yourself, who is the version of me who actually turned that into a reality? Get a mental image in your head of what that person looks like, and then reverse engineer it. Break it down and ask yourself, okay, knowing that, what routines did they develop? What behaviors did they create? What non negotiables did they follow through with every single day that got them to where they are? That's going to help you break down a game plan of, okay, this is how I need to start spending my days in order to actually get to where I want to be. Knowing that, though, is not enough. You then need to start pushing yourself to show up as that person in everything that you do. And the way that you do that is when you're in situations where in the past you rely on motivation or willpower or feelings, none of that's going to work. Like, what you need to do is ask yourself is, what would the person I want to become do right now? Would they make excuses? Would they put it off? Or would they follow through because they know it needs to get done? And when you start pushing yourself to show up as that person, that's how you'll change your thoughts, you'll change your patterns, and ultimately you'll evolve into that next level version of you.
Yeah, it's funny you say that. I had a friend when I first became a sales team lead, and now I was over a team of 15 to 20 people, when before I would just train one person at a time. I had this one person who worked in the retail store that I worked in. And every time that I made a decision that went against my identity of team lead, like whenever I did something that was more so for me than the greater good, this friend of mine, his name is Cody, he would always look at me, and it bothered me immensely when he said this to me at the time. But he would always look at me and say, "Is that something that a team lead would do? Or is that something that a team lead would say?" And when he said it, it hit me. I was like, "Oh, I can't believe you said that. Why are you calling me out like this? You're not a team lead. I'm the team lead." And I was, again, in my early 20s at this point, I had a lot to learn. I still do. But looking back on it, and in the moment, I knew he was right. Right. And now looking back on it, I say to myself, I'm really happy that he was there to really point out that character difference in who I was versus who I needed to be. So I feel like at the same time, it's important to get yourself in an environment of people who can call you out when you are not being that version of yourself that you need to be in order to reach that goal.
Yep. I love that he called you out on it, because sometimes you do need someone to shine a mirror up to be like, what actions are you actually doing here? But going back to this like mindset thing that I just shared, the reason why I love this is it's so applicable in different areas of our life. I use this all the time with the CEOs and business leaders I work with. Like when they're in challenging situations where, let's say, they need to have a difficult conversation or they need to stand their ground in a meeting, all these uncomfortable things are easy to avoid. It's just getting them to stop and ask themselves, what would the CEO I want to do or become do right now? Would they avoid this, or would they actually stand their ground and follow through? And anyone listening to this right now, I really want to encourage you to do the same thing. Like when you're in that meeting and you're a little bit anxious about speaking up to share your ideas, or when you need to have that tough conversation with a team member, whatever it is, stop allowing your current thinking or behaviors to come into it. Ask yourself, like, what would the person I want to become do right now? That person who's got to the next level, who's got the promotion, who's got the success that you want. When you start thinking and acting and behaving like them, that's when you actually start building momentum. And ultimately, that's the thing that's going to get you to the next level.
That's right. So once again, your upcoming book is Maybe You Should Give Up: The 7 Ways to Get Out of Your Own Way and Take Control of Your Life. So let me ask you, what does that idea of taking control of your life, what does that mean, to have control of your life? And is that truly possible?
The thing for me is like you're never going to be in complete control of what's going on around you, but the one thing you can always control is how you choose to respond to it. But
Hmm.
most people live their life in a reactive state where life is happening to them. They deal with challenges being driven by emotion, and that's why everything feels out of control. And that's why such a big part of it is breaking that cycle, because at the end of the day, there's a huge difference between a reaction and a response. A reaction is driven by emotion, whereas a response is controlled. And that's why it's about getting someone that when something goes wrong, that they can stop, they can process what's happening, they can understand it, and then choose how they respond to it. Because this is all about developing that mentality to start thinking in terms of solutions instead of problems. Because I know you said that there's a lot of people listening to the show right now who are in corporate settings. There's no doubt going to be never ending problems and fires that they face. Let's say, as an example, someone's listening to us right now and they have a mistake that comes up with a customer. What a lot of people will do is they'll start focusing on the past. They'll start dwelling on what happened. They'll beat themselves up. They'll focus on problems they can't change. If you want to think at a higher level, you have to shift that. Be like, okay, this is the situation. What do we need to do about it? Because the problem's going to be there regardless, but the mindset of focusing on solutions is how you empower yourself to move forward. So that's for me all about taking control. It's being like, okay, what action can I take today to get the results do I want? How can I start turning this around or focusing on what I need to do?
It's a great saying of looking at the solutions versus looking at the problem. And that's a big leadership characteristic. How does one shift that mindset from seeing the problem? Or how does one become aware of a situation in which it's time to respond? Like, is there a way that you remind yourself? Is there a certain way of training your mind in order to spot the response that is best serving of you?
100%. It goes back to what I said a few minutes ago, but just to kind of, you've got to recognize throughout the day when your emotions start to take over. So if you're in a situation where you stop getting frustrated or angry or stressed or overwhelmed, you have to force yourself to stop and slow down. And then you just need to ask yourself, like, why am I feeling this way? What has happened to cause me to take on this emotion? What's going on here? And then shift your focus to what do I need to do going forward? And it's all about you just becoming in tune with the way that you think and feel and shifting your attention from the past to the present and how you actually need to deal with it. Another example could be if you're in a situation where something's going wrong, a mistake's been made, someone's dropped the ball on something, there's an issue that needs your attention. You need to, again, stop and process it and be like, okay, what's the situation here? How do we now find a solution and deal with it? So it's the same process regardless. You've just got to slow down and be like, okay, what's actually happening here? And how do I move forward?
That's great. Yeah, I have a friend. His name's Rob Grahowski, and he used to always say, E plus R equals O. Events will happen, but it's how we react to those events that determines our outcome, right? And that mindset shift isn't going to happen overnight. And even the people in the highest of leadership positions may still not understand this, and they might still not be trained enough to recognize that emotional state that they're in, that they're in a state of anxiety, or they're in a state of nervousness, or they're in a state of they're feeling confronted, maybe like what you mentioned in the business meeting, right? But it's when you can train yourself to feel and have awareness that you're in that situation, that you're feeling those emotions, that you can then snap your fingers and say, how will I decide to react to this situation? Because you can't control what those people around the table do, right? This is why I asked you if that control is possible. You can't control them. You can't control the outcome necessarily. All that you can control is the way that you respond to each instance around that boardroom table, or really in any situation that you find yourself in the business world or your personal world.
Yeah. I'd love to throw in a real world example of this quickly because what you were just saying, just like this brought it into my mind. It's one of the examples I give in the book of there was a time a few months ago where I was sat on a train and there was this group of kids who were sat across from me and they were screaming and shouting. And I remember just sitting there on the edge of my seat getting so annoyed. I was just sat there like thinking, why will they not shut up? And then I just realized like they weren't annoying me. I was being reactive to them and choosing to get annoyed by what they were doing. But because I'd allowed my emotions to take over, I was so focused on the problem that I was blinded to any solutions. It was only when I brought that into my awareness, I could be like, okay, what can I actually do about this? I realized I could look out the window, I could turn up my music, I could focus on my work, I could even move seats and go sit somewhere else where I couldn't hear it. And it was only when I processed what was happening that I could then focus on what I could control and turn it around. And this is why the work that we're doing here, it's not about making you immune to your emotions. You're only human. You're going to have times that you get triggered or frustrated or angry, but it's about you recognizing as quickly as possible and then going into solution mode. And I think that's something we can all relate to, whether it's like noisy kids, traffic, getting stuck in a queue. All of these things happen to us every single day. And it's just looking at, okay, what can I control here? What can I do to change my response?
Yes. Traffic is the big one for me. And I'm not like a road rager by any means, but when I'm behind a slow vehicle, when it's like a 40-mile-per-hour speed limit and this person's going 37, I'm annoyed. I'm in my car, I'm stewing in my seat, right? And I recently had a guest on the show. His name is Nicholas Cassius Clay, and he's a mindfulness expert. And he talks about how to use those situations when you're in the train and the kids are running around you, when you're behind the vehicle in traffic that's going 5 miles under the speed limit, using those situations as a trigger to practice mindfulness. And really what you're talking about is a form of mindfulness, right? Being aware of how you feel, being aware of your thoughts. And like you said, once you are aware of those emotional states, that's when you get put into a state of finding solutions rather than searching for problems.
Yep. 100%. Like spoke to a client about this recently because he like does a 45-minute commute every single day. And he found in the past, like on that drive home every night, he would just get so frustrated. He'd sit in traffic. He would just get angry. He would just absolutely hate it. And we went through this mindset work and he messaged me saying like that night for the first time, he wasn't bothered by it. He said he
Wow.
looked out the window, he listened to his music. He just, for the first time, realized that the situation was going to be there regardless. So there was no point in him getting stressed out. He just needed to focus on what he could do and take some time just to process his day. And it was just that realization of, I can't change this. So there's no point me getting triggered by it. And this is why I love this work, because it's like once you start developing this awareness, it becomes almost like a superpower. It's just whether it's like in your home life, whether it's with your spouse, your kids, or meetings at work, it's just throughout the day, just recognizing, why am I being impacted here? Why am I being at the effect of all these things going on? And how do I shift my response? Because the more you do it, the easier it becomes. But it starts with going back to what I said before. You have to start becoming aware of why you feel the way that you do, and then shifting your focus to, okay, what do you need to do to move forward from it?
Yes. And there's such a liberation in the feeling of, I know I can't control what's happening around me, but I know that I can control and focus on the way that I react to this physically and or emotionally. There's a liberation in that power of self-control and self-choice. And I love that you're talking about it. And I know you're making a big difference in these business leaders' lives because they're having a stressful day at work. They're making all these decisions because some of these individuals, their only job is to make a key decision or two every single day. And then they're driving home and they're behind, Grandma Susie, who's going 20 miles an hour in a 40. So it's absolutely powerful. So the subtitle of your book is 7 Ways to Get Out of Your Own Way and Take Control of Your Life. We've talked about several ways already, I feel, especially when it comes to the overcoming of fear. But on your personal journey, or actually, let me frame this in the perspective of the clients in which you serve. What is one of the other struggles that is most pressing in the people that you serve that I'm sure a lot of people listening are facing? And what is the strategy that maybe you have it in your book of how they can get out of their own way in that situation?
Yeah. Just going back to who is listening to the show, I think probably the most powerful one is actually section 6 of the book, which is being too hard on yourself. Because anyone listening to this right now is no doubt a high achiever. There's someone who wants to get to that next level. But also, I'd be willing to bet that they're also their own harshest critic. And while that's a fantastic motivator, the problem with always being so hard on yourself is nothing feels like it's enough. So while it may push you to greatness, if you're always focusing on what you didn't do, how you could have got a little bit better, you're always going to be bringing into question your self-worth and your confidence. And I find for a lot of people, this is what stops them from being happy, because they're constantly in this headspace of what they didn't do and nothing ever feels like it's enough. And that's why I'm not going to sit here and say lower your goals and ambitions, but instead what you need to do is start to get a little bit more self-compassionate with knowing when you showed up and did your best. And a lot of that comes down to just having a clear intention of what actually is the outcome you're going for. I was talking to a CEO client about this the other day, and for her, the big thing we needed to implement is when she's going into projects or meetings or talks, so often she just reflects on it. She's like, I could have said that better. I could have done this. Like, this didn't go perfectly. Or even though we got this amazing result, these are things we need to improve on. Nothing's ever enough for her. So the guidance I've given her is, before she embarks on any of these, having a little bit of a conversation and figuring out what is the outcome that she would be at peace with. Not perfect, not like incredible, but that she could be a bit, do you know what, this is enough. So she can go into this without just going to sabotage herself and beating herself up, but then also reframing it in her own mind. If instead of being like, oh, there's these things that we need, could have done better, looking at the opportunity. I mean, like, okay, we've done this. As a result, we've learned these things. So the next time it's going to be even better. Again, same situation, but mentally a reframe where instead of you focusing on the negative, you look at the positives and how you help yourself grow. So it's all about giving up on that, being your own harshest critic, and instead having that self-compassion. It's being like, you know what, I showed up, I did the work, and I'm doing the best that I can here.
I'm hard on myself, brother. So that rings true for me personally. I'm always wondering, am I moving quick enough? At my age, this person was doing this and I'm doing this. And, what does that say about me? What's wrong with me? So I 100% agree with that. And I faced this more probably when I started my business in 2019. One of the things that really helped me, and I love what you used as an example with this one client that you're working with, of defining the outcome that you want out of a situation. And if you know that, then you're actually able to track and measure where you are versus where the outcome is that you want. But one of the things that really helped me is every single night before I go to sleep, and you can write this down, you can think about it, whatever works for you. I simply think it over in my mind and I remember it every night so I don't forget to do it. I always think, what are the three things that happened today that furthered me towards my goal or furthered me towards a better life for myself? Right. And it causes me to then go from the beginning of my day to the end of my day. And it causes me to give myself grace on, even if I didn't accomplish this giant, huge, monumental milestone, I was able to have these small wins along the way. And that's the last thing I think about before I go to sleep generally, is what are the three things that were great that happened for me today?
I do something very similar. One thing I'd love to pass on to you, though, if you're incredibly hard on yourself like this, I would also encourage you to do it in the morning. Like, I love future pacing, where one of the questions I ask myself at the beginning of every single day is, what needs to happen today for today to be a success? So I think ahead to 5 p.m. or whenever I'm going to finish, and it's like, what do I actually need to move forward, or what do I want to get done? And the reason why I love this framing is I find with a lot of high achievers, they've got so many things to do that they never feel like it's enough. Like, they'll knock so many things off the to-do list and they'll be like, oh, but I've still got this to do and all of these things. And they're trying to catch up on something that's just not possible. So it's just going into the day with a clear intention of what actually needs to happen for me at the end of the day to feel like, you know what, today was a great day. And then using that to guide you in what you do. And then if you do what you said as well as a reflection at the end, like, it's such a big boost for your confidence and focus.
That's huge. I'm going to do it. I'm going to try it. I love that. Thank you for that personal recommendation. You mentioned at the beginning of our conversation this idea of self-sabotage. And I believe we all do it. And maybe that's a big generalization, but I know that personally I do it. I catch myself doing it. I've gotten better at catching myself before I do it and recognizing this is an act of self-sabotage. But for those listening who maybe are at the very beginning of this journey, maybe you're speaking to Byron 15 years ago who just happened to come across and he's like, what's self-sabotage? How would you describe self-sabotage? How did you do it? And then we'll start there. How would you describe it and how were you acting on your own self-sabotage?
Yeah, so self-sabotage is when you know what you should be doing, but you're not doing it, or when you are moving, making progress, and then you just derail yourself. And for anyone listening to this right now, like, the reason why you sabotage yourself goes down to the way that your brain is subconsciously wired. Because what you need to understand is that your brain has been programmed for quantity of life, not quality. And what that means is it's been programmed in a way that it wants to survive. It doesn't want to thrive. It wants to keep everything the same types of relationships, the same amount of weight on your body, the same amount of wealth, happiness, and joy. It wants to keep everything the same. The reason being is everything in your past has been survived, meaning it's far safer than anything new, whereas your goals, your dreams, your aspirations, they're all new. So they bring with them an inherent risk. And that's why, even though you might be unhappy in the situation you're in right now, your brain takes comfort in what it knows. And this is why when you start to move forward or make progress, it fills your head with those doubts of, what if you're not good enough? What if you fail? What if you get rejected? Because it wants you to not take action and stay where you are, because it can predict the future and what's going on. And this is why you really have to understand the life that you want to live is on the other side of those mental roadblocks. But until you start to recognize why you're thinking the way that you do, and actually just start to give up on holding on to them, you're never going to break through. And it's such a fascinating thing for me, because it's just really understanding why we think the way that we do and why we're our own worst enemy.
So okay, so let's say you're working with a client of yours, and let's say this is a business leader, and you see them self-sabotage constantly, right? And I feel like we see it in others even more so than we see it in ourselves, which is another reason why being around people who can be constructive and helpful for you is super important, however you decide to do that. So you're looking at your client, Joe, let's say, and Joe is self-sabotaging left and right. Successful man, but self-sabotaging. And he could be more. He could be accomplishing his goals with much less stress and more ease. How do you help Joe to eliminate this pattern of self-sabotage?
So it starts by figuring out what's actually going on and what are they afraid of. I'll give you an example. Like, one of the case studies I used in the book was a business owner I was working with who, he was going through like this big launch period. Came to launch day, they were about to put out this new product and service, like all of this work got in. And he messaged me saying he thinks he's going to delay. And we got on the phone. I was like, what's going on here? And he was like, oh, everything's not ready yet. There's still so much stuff we need to do. Like, not everything's right. We started diving in further. The thing he was playing around with was the color of the font on one of the titles. And and so, like, we can laugh about it right now, but for him, he had built it up in his head that it wasn't perfect yet. And it was only when we started diving into it that he was afraid that he would put it out there and it would fail, that no one would buy, it wouldn't be successful. So he was just getting in his own way and sabotaging it. And it was only by really bringing it into his awareness what's actually going on here. What is he afraid of? We could then shift the focus to what could go right and what he needed to do. And then he had to push himself to take action. And this is why, to anyone listening, you really need to stop and ask yourself, like, what is actually coming up for you that's causing you to get in your own way? Is it something that you are sabotaging yourself for getting in shape because you're worried about how life is going to change? You're sabotaging your relationships because of your self-worth issues and feeling like you're not good enough, or you're afraid to let someone in. You need to just take a moment to really figure out what is actually going on, because that self-sabotage is a defense mechanism. It's coming from your brain, putting fears in your head. So the first step is really figuring out, like, what am I actually afraid of here? And then you need to address it and be like, okay, what do I need to do to move through this? Because like I said, that fear, it's wanting to keep you where you are, whereas the life that you want to live is on the other side of it. So until you know what it is and you push through it, you're not going to change it.
I feel that that's a big theme of this conversation, is your self-talk and the ability to ask yourself great questions. And really what this whole conversation has come down to is the foundation and the basis of self-awareness and being able to know yourself. And the way that you do that is by asking yourself these great questions. What am I really afraid of in this situation? What are my options in this situation? How do I want to feel in this situation? What should I do moving forward? And what can I do right now in order to make forward progress towards this, right? It's this ability. And what I'm spotting from you is you're really good at helping people to ask these big questions of themselves and begin to foster this habitat in their mind of positive self-talk versus the absence of awareness when it comes to the self-talk. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, but that's spot on. And there's another piece to this as well. One really interesting thing that you said earlier, which we moved on from it, so I didn't bring it back up. But you were talking about how when you were focusing on changing your life, you broke it down into little steps. And I find this is another area where we do self-sabotage, where we look at the goal that we want and it seems insurmountable. So we just don't do anything and we avoid it. And that's why I'm such a big believer that instead of focusing on step 5, you have to break it down and figure out what is step 1. What is the action that you can take today to allow yourself to move forward? Because when you can start taking micro actions, all of that's going to compound. That's how your confidence will go up. You'll build momentum, and that's how you'll move forward. Like, it could be a case of, let's say someone listening to us right now wants to start building a personal brand, but they're worried, I need to launch all this YouTube and this Instagram, and I need to do all these videos, all of these things, and they're so overwhelmed that they just don't get started. Well, the first step could be, how do you film that first video? How do you just put it out there? Or someone wants to run a marathon. That in itself is so daunting that they just do nothing. Well, how do you put yourself out there to go for that jog, to do that first run? Just start breaking it down into micro actions of what you can do today. And that's going to have such a big impact on your success.
Yes. Start small, be self-aware, move forward, right? Start small, have that self-awareness, ask great questions, move forward. So your book, Maybe You Should Give Up: The 7 Ways to Get Out of Your Own Way and Take Control of Your Life. This book launches in June. What is the official launch date of your upcoming book?
It's coming out June 27th. So yeah, we're getting very close to launch day, which is very exciting.
Yes. And since November, people have had the option of going on your website and actually pre-ordering a copy of your book. So when people pre-order the book, they'll just be notified once the book actually is launched. Is that correct?
Yeah, you can order it now from anywhere that sells books, whether it's Barnes& and Noble, Amazon, Walmart, Target. Yeah, if you place an order, it gets shipped out to you launch day. But for anyone who does go pre-order it as well, I'm doing a special offer. If they grab it from Barnes& and Noble or Waterstones and send me an email, I'm giving some additional bonuses, including the audio book and a few other video series as well. So just as a thank you for grabbing it exclusively from those retailers.
Amazing. So I'm going to have links in the description, guys, for you to go grab your copy of this book. As I'm sure you can tell from this conversation, if any of this has helped you, just imagine what you'll get once you actually read Byron's book, or when you buy it from Barnes & Noble or Waterstone, what you'll get from the audiobook and the other bonuses that he is offering as well. So I can't wait to grab my copy of this book, Byron. And to wrap this up, I'd like to ask you finally, if you could leave our audience with one additional strategy that has been very helpful in you and your client's life when it comes to getting out of our own way, what would that last final piece of advice or strategy be?
So you've got to get clear on what you actually want. Because I find for a lot of people, they do really well with figuring out their goals and what they want to do, but then they just lose sight of it. Take New Year's resolutions as an example. They get really motivated. They're like, these are all the things I want to do. Then life gets busy and it just becomes an afterthought. And this is why I'm such a big believer. You have to keep it top of mind what it is you actually want to do and why. You need to take 30 seconds every single morning just to reconnect yourself with your vision and what you're striving towards. Because at the end of the day, anyone can take action on the days they feel motivated, but it's on the days that you don't, which is ultimately going to define your results. And the way that you really push yourself to follow through is by having something bigger than yourself that you're working towards. You need to know this is why I need to show up. This is what I'm striving towards. And ultimately, then why you need to actually take action on it. If I just use myself as an example of this, like I said this to you at the start of this, like with this new book, one of our big goals is we want to hit Wall Street Journal and New York Times. And I've had so many days over the last few months where I'm like, I don't want to do this today. Like so much of my time has been spent filming videos for TikTok and Instagram. And I'm just like, I'm tired. Like I do not want to face this. So I actually have the New York Times bestseller logo printed out on my desk in front of me.
Uh,
And every single morning I sit down and I look at that and I'm being like, do you know what? That's the reason why I'm doing this, because that motivates me. And anyone listening to us right now, it could be a picture of your family. It could be like the house, the career, whatever it is. You need to find something that pushes you to want to take action. It could even be like, say you want to get in shape, the picture of the body you want. Like, it doesn't matter. You've got to figure out what inspires you and use that every single morning to get yourself in the right headspace to be like, this is why I need to show up.
That's inspirational, brother. Well, based on the work that you're doing, based on the podcast you're recording, I know that you'll get there, and we're happy to help however we can. And thank you for sharing that, by the way. It's a vulnerable thing to share, and I think it's very helpful for those listening, because the question I would ask is, what is that thing that you want, guys? What is that thing that you're going after? Is it the specific body? Is it the specific career? Is it a certain amount of money? And then I would ask, what's that money going to do? Is it going to get you the house, the car, the guitar, like whatever it might be? What is that going to do for you? And like you said, Byron, you've got that Wall Street Journal logo right in front of you every single day. We are visual creatures who need to see the end result. So have the picture of what you want in front of you, somewhere where you see it. If it's on the bathroom mirror, awesome. If it's in front of the computer, like you've got it, Byron, awesome. Put it somewhere you're going to see it, because as well as being visual creatures, we are habitual creatures who will forget what it is we want. So I love your idea of 30 seconds every single morning. Look at what you want. Think about what you want. Even feel as if you've already achieved what you want, to get yourself on the same wavelength or vibration of that which it is that you want to attract. But that's an incredible piece to leave us with, my friend. And thank you for that. That's helpful.
Thanks for having me here. This was a lot of fun.
Yes. Where's the best place that we can follow your journey moving forward, Byron? On what platform do you hang out on the most?
So the platform I'm most active on is LinkedIn, but I also put daily content out on Instagram, Facebook, and TikTok. So just search for author Byron Morrison or go to byronmorrison.com and you can find out more about me and everything going on there.
Amazing. It's been a pleasure having you on the show, Byron. Thank you for sharing a lot of the wisdom in your book, but I know we only scraped the surface. So thank you for sharing your time, your wisdom, and space here with me on the Be Better broadcast. Byron's upcoming book is launching at the end of June. It is called Maybe You Should Give Up: The 7 Ways to Get Out of Your Own Way and Take Control of Your Life. We talked about overcoming fear today. We talked about the imposter syndrome. We talked about self-sabotage. We talked about self-awareness and responding in a way that better serves you and the outcome that you seek. We talked about at the very end there how to determine what it is you want and remind yourself of that so you can continue making steps towards it. So we covered a lot in this conversation. And if you want even more, go pre-order a copy of Byron's new book. Links are in the description. And if you order it again from Barnes & Noble and Waterstone, you'll get those additional bonuses when you email Byron. The link will be in the description in order to take advantage of that. I hope that you took away even just one small thing that you're going to use moving forward in your own life, career, or business. Choose one and put it to action today. Maybe you'll go print out a picture of what you want. Maybe you will make a concerted effort to be more aware of the way that you feel in certain situations, such as a business meeting or, like the other example we used, traffic. And if you will take away one thing and use it, please share this show with just one other person who could use that same takeaway as well. We've grown the way that we have over the past 2 years and almost 300 episodes because you share the show, because you are the best part of the Be Better team. Thank you so much for watching and listening. And until we talk again next time, continue to be better.